Hello, it's Hannah, and you are listening to No Longer Legally Detained, the podcast about life after the psych ward, answering the big question, how to navigate being an adult when you never expected to be one. Hello, it's Hannah, and welcome back. Thank you so much for all the love and support on my first episode and mine and Millie's first episode. It's so exciting. I can't believe people have actually listened, and we've had some really lovely feedback, which is so nice. So thank you so much to everybody who has listened, and thank you so much for coming back. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week. There's a lot of awareness weeks in May. I decided to do this second episode on how I improve my mental health. An honest, brutal, non-cliche way I went from a revolving door patient, depressed, anxious and hopeless, to the person I am today. I'm excited to get into this topic. We'll just put a little content warning from the beginning, obviously talking about mental health, nothing in any detail, not going into anything really mental illness related, but as always, make sure you look after yourselves. And yeah, with that being said, let's get into it. So, mental health is such a controversial topic, and I think that's because it's so misunderstood. And there are kind of two words, mental health and mental illness, that are kind of used interchangeably when they're not words that can be used interchangeably. And I think that leads to a lot of confusion in terms of when we're talking about mental health. And I know there's been a lot of posts on Instagram about whether Mental Health Awareness Week is a waste of time or whether we're excluding mental illness from the conversation. And everyone has their opinion. No one's right or wrong. But for me, I do think that they're separate and therefore should be treated separately, as I think that helps people kind of see the difference, because both of them need to be viewed and treated in very different ways. Because mental health is the same as physical health. We all have it. It's part of everyone's life. Our physical health is like the state of our body, whereas our mental health is the state of our mind and our feelings and our emotions. And just as our physical health goes up and down and influences lots of parts of our lives, both good and bad, so does our mental health. And therefore, our mental health can impact lots of things that happen to us. And just as we need to look after our physical health, we obviously need to look after our mental health. And just as we can be feeling more physically unwell at times, the same we can be struggling more with our mental health or feeling overwhelmed or stressed or unhappy. But that's not the same as like a mental illness, which is the same as like physical health. You know, if you have a cold or if you're not looking after yourself as well, so you're not feeling as fit or you're not feeling as healthy, that's not an illness. Whereas if you have cancer or if you had a long-term heart condition, you'd count yourself as having an illness, and that they would impact your daily life more. Not to say that a cold doesn't impact your daily life, but as you can see, like, it's in a different way, isn't it? And I think that's the thing with mental illness, when you're looking at things like depression or OCD or PTSD, bipolar, anorexia, those things are illnesses just the same as a physical illness, but obviously not the same as a physical illness. And they affect like our ability to function over a long period of time. It's so much more than just what a walk or having a bath can cure. And the stigma and the misunderstanding of these is really hard and really still there and hasn't really got any better. So I think it's having that separation of what works for one won't necessarily work for the other. So what is Mental Health Awareness Week? I'm not really sure which one it's kind of based on, whether it's based on more mental illness, whether it's more based on mental health. I think I took it very literally in the autistic sense that it says Mental Health Awareness Week, so I was going with its mental health, just like everybody's mental health. But I don't know. But in today's episode, I wanted to focus more on like the mental health side of things, and how I have gone on a journey to kind of find myself and the things that I do to improve my everyday well-being. I definitely have struggled with mental illness in the past and still do to a certain extent. But once I found out I was neurodivergent, that added a new kind of aspect, new dimension to the whole situation. And being neurodivergent isn't a mental health problem or mental illness. And with every day being neurodivergent, obviously there are lots of challenges that relate to being neurodivergent, but also just as an adult, just as a person in the world, my mental health goes up and down, life's stressful, life's overwhelming. And so I kind of wanted to share some of the tips and tricks that I have started to use that really have benefited me so much. So what is the first thing that I did to help improve my mental health? And this is a slightly bizarre one, and slightly probably controversial, but I stopped trying. And let me clear that up. So I am a perfectionist and I always want everything to be perfect. And the same with kind of my mental illness recovery is I was putting so much effort into being better. I was putting so much effort into recovery. I was putting so much effort into really like overthinking the whole process that actually I was making myself more poorly. And I think the same with mental health. I was listening to a podcast the other week and it gave all of these like wellness tips, and I was thinking, right, that's it. I need to be, getting up at a certain time. I need to be doing these things before I have my breakfast, and I need to be drinking this and doing that. And it's like, oh my goodness, there's so many things. And it was like really overwhelming. And then I'm trying to like put all these new routines into my life, and I'm getting more and more stressed because I can't fit all the routines into my life. It's not working. And then I'm feeling more of a failure because I'm thinking, well, I'm not doing that. I'm not looking after myself. I've not got all these routines and all these things I'm doing for my mental health. And actually, when I stopped and was like, you can't do this perfectly. You're never going to be, there is no such thing as perfect. And actually, you need to kind of stop trying to have it all together and have this great mental health, because in trying to do that, you are inherently actually making it worse for yourself. And that doesn't mean that I did the opposite and tried to make things worse. And it doesn't mean that I don't try and put things that would help my mental health into my daily life, but it meant I stopped focusing on it and it being like the be all and end all, and thinking like the only way that I'm going to be happy or the only way that I'm going to be able to cope with life is if I've got a 10-part morning routine and I've got a 10-part evening routine and I've got this and I've got that and I've got all my alarms set and I've got, my sleep routine perfect and I've got, my skincare routine perfect and all of those things. And actually, when I stopped and let go and was like, right, that is not necessarily how your brain works. And also, you're putting so much pressure on yourself to do these things. Your mental health is getting worse. So that is counterproductive. Okay, so my next one is finding a purpose. And this is the big one. And in some ways, this is what saved my life. I mean, I say that a lot about different things, but looking back, being a revolving door patient and being someone who was just so stuck in like mental illness and just not feeling there was a way out due to such a fear of life and fear of being an adult and just the unknown, and just everything was so scary. And I got stuck in a cycle, and there was no motivation to get out of that cycle. And now I realise that was because I didn't have a purpose. Like every day I was waking up, I had nothing to do, I had no reason for being. And now sometimes like when we're busy, we'll be like, oh, I wish I could just like not do anything and just like lie in bed for the rest of my life. But having done that for a long time, it is so boring. And as much as I do like to have a rest, I'm so glad that I now have a purpose and a reason to do things, because that has massively improved my mental health. Like no end. Knowing that I am needed for something, or that I have something that I need to do, really did help. So I became a specialist teaching and learning assistant, and for me that was the turning point. Looking back, I didn't realise it at the time, but suddenly I was living my life not just for me. It wasn't, if I didn't turn up to work, that didn't just affect me, but that affected the child as well. They were then left. Obviously someone else would hopefully have stepped in if I wasn't there, but obviously it's not that thing of like having a complex thinking you're like the most important person in the world, but that thing of knowing like that I'd built up such a great relationship with that child and that we had a great time, and I was giving them so many things in terms of their education and just in terms of life. And if I wasn't there, they didn't get that. And that kind of really, really helped me, because it was that thing of like, oh, suddenly if I'm having a bad day, if I don't go to work, they're going to have an even worse day. And actually, the more I got out of the house, the more I went to work each day, the more I had this purpose, and I became a person. I had an identity, I had a reason for being. And with that, it then built onto other things. And then I started to go on this journey of like finding out who I was. But it was through having that job and having that kind of identity and purpose for someone else. And I would fully admit that it wasn't for myself. I did it for them. But I needed that. And then people always say you need to do it for yourself. And I totally agree. And in the end, I did do it for myself. But I couldn't do it for myself in the moment. I didn't feel like I was worthy. I didn't feel I was deserving of having a life. And also I think I just couldn't do it for myself. I really couldn't. But doing it for someone else then allowed me to then be able to do it for myself. And it was through that, having a reason to get up, having a reason to go somewhere, having other things in my brain, I then went on that journey of finding who I was, and that allowed me to then find other purposes away from work in terms of my hobbies and friends and all those other things that I love. But knowing that I have something to do, and that's why the activism work that I do is so key. And even though like it often leads to many existential crises of like, oh my goodness, this is so much, and I sometimes feel like so weighed down by all these different thoughts and all these different situations that are happening in the world that feel so wrong and unfair, and I want to make a difference, but I know I, as one singular person, there are only very small things that I can do. But knowing that I am part of the movement and I'm part of making the change is such a purpose for me. And even when the times are tough and times are hard, I know why I'm here and why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that's really, really helped. Gets you out of your own world, even for a small amount of time. And even if the rest of the time I was stuck in my own thoughts and the horrible place that I was in, those moments I wasn't. And it was a slow break. And then slowly over time, the balance changed. And it went from being mainly horrible, but a little bit of good, to mainly good and only a little bit of horrible. And even now, the horrible doesn't go away. It's still there. But part of kind of finding my purpose and stopping trying is accepting that it's never going to go away, but being able to live around it and within it is part of life. And that's something that we all have to do. Not just those of us who've had past experiences of mental illness. Actually, life is one up and down roller coaster, and as cliche and cringy and annoying as it is, all the different emotions that we experience is what makes life life. And obviously there are some that, you know, you could do without, but on the whole, all of them make up the experience of being human and being alive, and that is what makes you and what it makes life so special. Kind of staying on the cliche and cringy, another big thing that helped me improve my overall mental health and well-being and helped me feel safer and more comfortable in the world was finding my identity and finding out who I was and learning who Hannah is and being confident enough to be authentically myself. For anyone who's known me for a bit will know that creativity is so important to me, and the power of creativity is one that we too often underestimate. And for me, creativity is so much more than just art and drawing. It takes so many different forms. It can be dance, music, spoken word. It gives us the autonomy to investigate alternative methods of problem solving, communicating and expression. And I think my brain is wired in a creative way, and it's a way that I can express the thoughts that I never can really articulate, and it's a form of escapism to a place that just makes sense. And within creativity there are no rules or set answers, but the freedom to be whoever I want to be. And it was through creativity that I have gone on this journey of self-discovery. And I think there's often talk about finding yourself and self-discovery, and I know there can be a lot of kind of existential crises that go on with like trying to find out who you are and feeling other people have it together or know who they are and you don't. And that was definitely the case for me. But what I think I've learned is that actually finding out who you are isn't a destination, just like happiness. It's a journey, and it's something that you never get to, but you kind of learn more and more about yourself as you go through life, and as things change and your identity changes over time. And I think the turning point for me in learning more about who I was after I was diagnosed as autistic in 2020. And for me then, the world of like neurodivergence opened up, and it was an explanation that I wasn't this strange broken horse, but I was actually just a normal zebra. And again, it wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was that slow education of myself to learn about what those things meant, and not just what they meant in a clinical term or what they meant to other people, what they truly actually meant to me. And I did that through creativity, and I began to be able to express myself in a way that I'd never been able to before, and get lost and get away from my own head and starting to understand and investigate what makes my brain tick. And being diagnosed as autistic wasn't like an overnight kind of, oh, right, I get it now. I still didn't feel like I related to the autistic community necessarily. And I also had my own internalized ableism and like fear of being different and having to cope with constant discrimination and being treated badly by other people. And that all affects your own perception of yourself. And it's taken a long time and a lot of building up within myself to have the confidence to know that those things are going to happen on the outside, but internally I know who I am, and I am proud and strong of who I am inside. And that's really tricky, because still now, you know, people will say things to me and it does make me question who I am, and I think that's totally normal, and it's never going to go away. But I am taking hope and using what I've got to allow myself to keep pursuing what I believe and pursuing my path and pursuing my interests and being authentically myself for how that looks now, and trying not to worry about how other people take that, because I would never hurt anybody else. Nothing I ever do is hurting other people or putting other people at risk, or, you know, any of those things. That it's all within myself, and I hope that actually some of the things I do maybe even make a little bit of a difference. And I think for me, that is what being authentically me means. It means being myself, obviously not to the detriment of anybody else, but also being me and not having to conform to something else doesn't mean I'm actually using to the detriment of myself and my own well-being. And I think that links into so many things, especially around now where it's exam season and there's so much pressure on like success. And I definitely believed success was this linear model, and I forced myself to start 4 A-levels in biology, chemistry, maths and psychology. I wanted to go and do medicine or do paramedicine, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, that wasn't the path that was going to work. And I never even got to finish my first year of A-levels, and I ended up spending 4 to 5 years in and out of hospital. And I lost a large part of my life due to lots of different kind of mental illnesses. And I think it was when I came out of hospital and I'd met so many different people, and you meet so many different people from different walks of life, and I've started to realise that our school system is very much a sausage factory. It is squeezing out perfectly uniform sausages, and any deviation from that is unwanted and discarded. And actually in real life, I guess a lot of the systems are the same, but you just doesn't have to be. And there are freedoms of adult life, and there are things that we can see that there are different ways of being. It's actually only been since December of last year and the beginning of this year that I actually started truly discovering who I was. And I think it's bonkers that as a society, we expect teenagers to know what they want to do and to carve out a path. And actually, that's great. You know, you can choose to start something, but there are so many different things you can do in your life. And just because you start one thing doesn't mean that later on you can't do something else. And it was through this kind of learning what I actually enjoyed. And it's so different. Like, I do so much creativity now, and the things I do now I would never have ever even dreamed of or even existed when I was in primary school. And then in secondary school, I didn't realise the majority of them even existed, and the ones that I did were never something that I viewed myself doing. And now I'm doing them. I truly have found my solace. Like, I found a place that I could escape to. And now when I'm being me, I do feel, I guess, happier, and kind of, there feels like less pressure. And that doesn't mean it's plain sailing. And there's definitely no kind of ever, there is no happily ever after. But actually coming to realise that, and coming to realise that in this world, it's going to be kind of a crazy ride, and that once I know who I am and what I am, labels and all, that then the ones who matter understand my difficulties and accept and accommodate me, and those who don't never will. And they weren't going to do it whether I had labels, whether I knew who I was, whether I was trying to be what they wanted. I was never going to fit. And actually now it's coming to accept that you're not going to be liked by everybody. Not everybody's going to agree with what you're doing. And that's hard, but also in the same way, it's very freeing to know that some people are just not your people. And actually that's okay, because for every one person who isn't your person, there is another person who totally is your person. And those are the people that you want to spend time with and want to have in your life and be part of your journey. And that can be hard, because sometimes we think somebody might be in our book forever. And I was saying this to a friend the other day, that especially with friendships, sometimes we think somebody is going to be in our whole story, and actually they're only a chapter or they're only a page, and that hurts. But our story is still our story, and then there are other people who will be in our story forever, and there will be other people who are in the trilogies of our story, and we want people in our lives who are adding pages to that story and not taking pages away. And I think that is what identity has given me, the ability to take the things that I want out of life and be able to pursue the things that make me tick and make me happy, and finding the people who also have those similar interests and trying to not let the people who don't impact my life. I guess we're on this floating rock in the middle of space, and it's kind of all a very bizarre concept when you actually think about life. But I'm hoping that for the rest of my life that I am going to be able to be my authentic self, that I'm going to be able to follow the passions and pursue the life that I want. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to help others. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to do music and dance and sing. I hope that I make a positive impact in even my own small corner of the world. And if I get to achieve those things, then my life has been very much worth living. And I definitely am glad that I have got the chance to do that. So that comes to the end of today's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that something that I said today was useful. That ramble kind of had some kind of coherent points. And I hope that from this and from Mental Health Awareness Week, we can take away the hope of finding our identity and finding our authentic selves and learning to carve our own path in life and not feeling pressured to live a life that isn't what we believe in. So if you did like today's episode, please share the podcast. That would be amazing. Follow me on Instagram at Legally Detained. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. And if you've got to the end, thank you. You're amazing. And love you all lots and lots and lots. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.